Greetings, friends. Russian war criminals continue to terrorize our country and strike at the civilian population. Last night in Odessa, Russian degenerates hit a residential building with a drone. At the same time, Ukraine continues to carry out drone attacks on the military-industrial complex of the so-called Russian Federation. In the Lipetsk region, the alarm was only turned on after the explosions had already occurred.
10 of them have already arrived at the designated location.
Yeah, it only started working now.
In the city of Yelets, several drones struck a plant called Energia, which is part of the military-industrial complex of the so-called Russia. This plant manufactures batteries that are used in Russian drones, as well as by the Russian Navy. By the way, this is not the first attack. Earlier in May, it was also hit. A few hours before that, at night, the Security Service of Ukraine also pleased us with good news, as drones attacked a large ammunition depot near the temporarily occupied Kharkiv in the Donetsk region. Judging by the explosion, it was like a mini nuke.
Yes.
Oh my holy shit. That's something.
Oh damn.
Secondary detonation of Russian ammunition could be heard for a long time afterwards. And that's wonderful. It detonated. Well, today we'll talk in more detail about the suspension of American military aid to Ukraine and about how so-called Russia is losing not only Azerbaijan but also Armenia. But let's take it one step at a time. And now, let's talk about the most important thing.
Donate to Rosaries, bring our victory closer. Glory to Ukraine!
Glory to the heroes. In order for us to better supply our troops to destroy the Russian occupiers and to buy more Shahed interceptors, we really need your tuhivnias. The payment details as always are in the description of this video. And if for some reason you still haven't subscribed to my channel, do it right now. The situation with the conflict between Azerbaijan and the so-called Russian Federation is not calming down at all.
Azerbaijan continues to escalate and worsen the diplomatic conflict with Russia.
And it seems that the Russians still haven't drawn the right conclusions. Their propagandists continue to support the pogrom against Azerbaijanis.
These two detainees, the ones who died, they may not have died from heart attacks. Honestly, I couldn't care less about that.
At the same time, the Russians called Azerbaijan an enemy of the so-called Russia and immediately said that they do not pose a threat to Azerbaijan.
So now, essentially, we have a new enemy.
Russia has never threatened and does not threaten Azerbaijan.
No, of course not. What are you talking about? The Russians have never occupied Azerbaijan, and right now they are not making any territorial claims against it, especially regarding Karabakh.
Karabakh is neither Azerbaijani nor Armenia. Karabakh became part of the Russian Empire.
And you won't believe it, but one of the Russian propagandists didn't even mention Ukraine. Usually, for Russians, Ukrainians are to blame for everything, but this time Azerbaijanis and other peoples of the Caucasus are being blamed for all the troubles of the so-called Russian Federation.
It is precisely because of the Caucasus, primarily from Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Georgia, that all the corruption, all the filth, this so-called horde method of bribery, all of that, came from there.
Russians are so outraged with Azerbaijan because the country demonstrated its national dignity and refused to tolerate Russian humiliation, instead responding to the Russians. That's why they're furious and compare it to Ukraine.
Azerbaijan seriously believes that it can compete with Russia on equal footing like two sort of regional powers. Azerbaijan is now turning into a second Ukraine.
Russians have this old tradition. Every few months they compare some random country to Ukraine and issue threats. But these threats never go any further because the Russians are bogged down in the war against Ukraine. Right now, they clearly have other things to worry about, and the only thing left for them is to express concern towards Azerbaijan.
A note was handed to the Azerbaijani ambassador regarding unacceptable actions of their law enforcement.
Moreover, and this is worth pointing out separately, the Russians have somehow managed to quarrel simultaneously with both Azerbaijan and Armenia, which is increasingly distancing itself from the so-called Russia. A few weeks ago, the Armenian authorities announced that a pro-Russian coup was being prepared in the country, and its organizer was the local equivalent of Medvedchuk.
The Tashir group of companies is accused of publicly calling for the seizure of power. Last night, his home was searched.
He was arrested, but representatives of the local pro-Russian church began to speak up for him, and some of them were also arrested on charges of participating in preparations for a coup d'etat.
In Armenia, Archbishop Mikhail Ajapakian has been arrested for 2 months. This decision was made by a Yerevan court just a few hours ago.
As expected, the Russians were furious, most notably the turncoat Margarita Simonian, who immediately called Pashinyan the Antichrist.
He's their own Armenian degenerate. He really is the Antichrist.
Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of the so-called Russian Federation, also expressed deep concern. He claims not to interfere in Armenia's internal affairs, but he does.
The issue was discussed, and everyone expressed serious concern about what is happening inside.
It's clear that what's happening in the Republic of Armenia is an internal matter.
The Armenian foreign minister responded to Lavrov and urged him not to interfere in the country's internal affairs. But of course the Russians didn't listen. Recently, Armenia has been noticeably distancing itself from the so-called Russian Federation. Armenia has suspended its participation in the CSTO. And from time to time, Pashinyan also publicly clashes with Lukashenko.
We'll see, maybe there won't be a television so you can participate remotely.
No problem. No problem.
For us, of course, this is good news because the geopolitical influence of the so-called Russian Federation is significantly weakening. The Russians have already lost Syria and are practically absent from the Mediterranean Sea. The Russians are also having problems with the Iranians after recent events. And now the Caucasus as well. Perhaps these are just interesting coincidences, but both the Russians and others see a Turkish trace in what is happening, not even a Ukrainian one.
And all this is being done in order to destroy Armenia, to destroy Armenians on the orders of Nikol Pashinyan's Turkish masters.
In recent months, Armenian Prime Minister Pashinyan has significantly drawn closer to Erdogan. Azerbaijan is also an ally of Turkey. And the Russians are convinced that what is happening has been personally approved by Erdogan. The Russians see what is happening as the implementation of the Turkish doctrine of pan-Turkism, which advocates the unification of all Turkic peoples, including those living on the territory of so-called Russia, such as the Tatars. By the way, just recently, while the conflict between Russians and Azerbaijanis was ongoing, the head of Tatarstan flew out and met with Erdogan.
Thank you very much for coming here today. We truly appreciate your presence.
Russian patriots were also infuriated by this and saw it as a stab in the back. But now let's talk about the bad news for Ukraine regarding arms supplies from the United States. There has actually been some confusion about this issue. White House representatives initially confirmed information about the suspension of arms deliveries, but then the State Department denied this same information. We have not suspended the shipment of weapons to Ukraine. This is one aspect, one situation, one event that has changed. This is not a cessation of our assistance to Ukraine or of weapons supplies. At the same time, the Pentagon avoids giving a direct answer to the question and explains that they have created a structure to assess whether the United States itself has enough weapons.
What we have done here at the Department of Defense is create a structure to analyze which munitions we are sending where to help the President and the Secretary of Defense make decisions.
The statements of American officials are, to put it mildly, somewhat contradictory and inconsistent. The publication Politico believes that the decision to suspend military aid to Ukraine was made not by Trump, but by one of the deputy secretaries of defense. For many Republicans close to Donald Trump, this came as a complete surprise. Moreover, the suspension of arms deliveries was not coordinated with the US State Department or other government agencies in the States. I think all of this was done by the Director of Policy at the US Department of Defense, this guy Colby. Essentially, we don't have a national security advisor, said Congressman Mike McCall. I'm not even sure that Secretary of State Rubio was consulted about this. There is an internal division within the White House. This confusion doesn't make things any easier for us, but perhaps the situation will change in the near future. Although the Russians are already celebrating.
Well, in any case, the less weapons are supplied to Ukraine, the closer the end of the special military operation.
And now we definitely need to increase our support for our military. Thanks to you, in June we raised almost 300 million hryvnias and purchased more than 12,000 different FPV drones. Thank you for this extremely important support. And in the past day alone, thanks to you, our soldiers received another 219 new FPV drones.
Congratulations! We are the Rubopak fighters of the 71st Separat Jaeger Brigade of the Air Assault Forces. We thank Serhiy Sternenko's community for providing us with 50 excellent Ruzores drones, which will destroy the enemy on the hottest front lines. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes.
Wishing you good health. We are the Kotiki unit of the 130th Battalion. We want to thank Mr. Sternenko and his community for providing 50 Russia-Azerbaijan drones. With their help, we will destroy the enemy in the Zaporizhzhia direction. Glory to Ukraine.
We are the Montico UAV unit operating in the Donetsk direction. And today we want to express our gratitude to Serhiy Sternenko's foundation for providing 20 excellent anti-aircraft drones. Thanks to these drones, we can continue doing our job. And to you, dear subscribers, we have a big request. Instead of your morning coffee, your hryvnia, remember, helps bring victory closer. So, glory to Ukraine.
Wishing you good health. We are the Rupak Diki Hasdi unit, and we want to thank the Sternenko community for providing us with 50 drones. Donate to Russoriz and help bring our victory closer. Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes.
We wish you good health. We want to express our gratitude to the Sternenko community for providing drones with fiber optics. Together to victory. Glory to Ukraine.
We wish you strength. We, the Rupak Diki Hasdi unit, express our gratitude to the Sternenko community for providing us with 10 fiber optic drones along with a control station. These birds will soon fly out to destroy the enemy. Together to victory. Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes. Friends, we are also continuing to receive positive news about intercepting Shahids with FPVs. But for now, I won't say everything publicly. Keep supporting the security and defense forces of Ukraine.